السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. معكم الأستاذ أسامة من مجموعة الواتن الدولية. اليوم إن شاء الله راح نستكمل درسنا في برنامج الستريتور. إن شاء الله اليوم حيكون درسنا شوي مكثف. راح ناخد درسين في أو محاضرتين اليوم مع بعض. طبعا اليوم إن شاء الله راح نكمل في الأشكال. إحنا كنا في الدرس الماضي كنا أو وقفنا عند درس الأشكال. اليوم إن شاء الله راح نستكمل درس الأشكال بشكل طبيعي. خلينا نقول بسم الله ونبلش. تمام، مثل ما احنا شايفين هون في عنا لوجو راح نصممه بشكل جدا جميل، بحيث نحن آه، يكون مثل كأنه شو مثل ما شايفين شكل 3D.
Just a rectangle like this. This is going to be the back of his eye, and then if you use your direct selection tool, which is this one, you can bring and select the shape. Make sure you click in the middle and not one of the corners. You can then drag these rounded points to round it off. But then one trick I always do is to simplify this
راح
shape
شايفين
before
هون
you edit it any
بلش
further, so you've only got 6
الدوائر نعمل
points.
بشكل أسهل.
Because if you don't do that, you end up with 2 points at this top bit, which is just super annoying when you're trying to do anything with it. So yeah, always if you've done this to any kind of pill shape, simplify it down to 6, and then now we've got one nice point that we can manipulate how we like. So yeah, then I reckon to get that nice eye shape, I'm just going to lengthen the gap between that top bit and these points in the middle. So I'll select just those
هون
with direct
نحن
selection, and then
بكل
press
بساطة
E
عم
to
نعمل
bring up the
اشتراك
transform tools
للفايل
all
أو
the way across
للدائرة.
this one, and then shrink that down slightly so you've got a bit more space. And then just to sort of even those up, I'm going to Shift C, which will bring up the, I don't know what they call this, anchor point tool. And then
هون في
just
عنا
bring
الأنكر
out
بوينت
these
تول.
corners a little bit. So
راح
doing it this way, you know, it's not
نستخدمها
perfect.
مشان
You're
نحن
not getting like the same exact corners on each side
نبلش شغل
because you're
عليها.
doing it kind of by hand. I actually think that gives it a nice end look that's just a little bit less perfect than if you were using geometric shapes. Cool. So that's the basic shape for his eye. I'm going to make the center of this white. And then we're just going to duplicate this to make the pupil. So Command C, Command F should paste in front. Yep. And hold Option Shift to scale down. And then we're just going to flick the color into the center as well. So now we have a nice pupil. Alright, now the next thing we're going to do is create our little star for his eye. So you can just start with a circle. And I think maybe for ease of seeing this, I'll just switch that off so we just do a stroke. So I've just made a circle. We're going to go to Effect and Distort and Transform and Pucker and Rote. And this is a really easy way to get a star quite quickly. We're going to drag it towards the pucker side. Probably about 60% is good, 62. That looks all right. Hit OK.
نعم.
And then because we don't really need to adjust this anymore, I'm quite happy with
بالنسبة
that.
لمستواي ما قبل الدورة كان جيد نسبيا، بس كان
And appearance, and then we've got this as a path and not
مع
a
شكسبير لمدة 10 أو 15 دقيقة، وكذلك
is quite rounded and friendly. We don't want these pointy corners either. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over to the stroke panel and let's go show all options, which is just in here. And we're going to flick the corners off pointy and make sure that the cap is rounded. And that's for all of our lines as well. We'll make sure that's on. And then I think we're also just going to drag these points in a little bit with our direct selection tool so that it's a bit more friendly again. So we just want this to be white.
هون حاليا بنغير اللون بشكل طبيعي.
As it is there. So we'll drag this over on top of his eyeball and hold Shift to scale it down while remaining proportional like that. And that's the basic basis of our eye. But we also want him to have a little eyelid. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this holding Option and Shift. So we have have our base
يعني
layer.
قواعديا
And
بالشكل
then
الصحيح.
I'm going to grab
بعد
the
دورة
brush tool and just draw a line
صحيح.
across
بعد
like
دورة اللي دخلتها قدرت إني أكون
and
الجمل
I
بالشكل
will
الصحيح
select
قواعديا.
that
صرت
one.
أقدر أتكلم لمدة
And then
طويلة لأني
we're going
صرت
to use
أملك
the pen
مخزون أو
tool
كم
to
هائل من
shape the document.
الكلمات اللي تساعد.
This one here, and we're going to separate these shapes. And then all we need is this one.
تمام.
That's invalid, and we can just pop it exactly over the top, and we'll make it the same orange as our orange itself. And then we're just going to bring this to the front. So Command Shift bracket, or you can right click arrange to bring up those tools.
صحيح. بعد دورة اللي دخلتها قدرت إني أكون الجمل.
Alright, that's our eye basically. So we'll just bring that over onto our orange, and we'll duplicate it
بعد
to make the second one. And because he's kind of on a bit of an angle, I'm just shifting this other one up slightly. So they're kind of like he's on a bit of an angle. Cool. All right, what else does an orange have on its face? Probably a nose. So this one will be pretty easy to do. We're just going to use the pen tool and draw kind of a bit of an oblongy shape.
دورة
3 points, you know, that should basically do it.
بعد
Really
دورة
simple
اللي
shape.
بالشكل الصحيح. بعد دورة اللي دخلتها قدرت إني أكون الجمل بالشكل الصحيح قواعديا. صرت
And make sure again the strokes are set to these ones. Cool. All right, now he's got a nose. And then for the mouth, you could experiment with all kinds of mouth shapes because I think the mouth really helps to show expression. But today we're just going to do a little puckered mouth because he is freshly squeezed and we want to get that.
أنا بنحاول نرسم الوجه
So again,
أو
with the pen
اللسان
tool, we're just going to draw a little
للشيب
line like
تبعنا.
this. We don't need a fill on this one either. And then we're going to draw a little smile, just little. And then we can take this shape, Command Option Shift to drag it out again. O will be your reverse tool, which is another very handy shortcut to just learn, but it's up here if you need it. And then hold Shift and you can just reverse that one around. And then we'll just move it up into place. Maybe we'll make him a little bit more smiley. If we bring up our tool, we can convert this anchor to also be a curved one. And then adjust them. And that looks pretty good. I'm just going to group that. So Command G. Oh no. Oh, what happened? We missed an anchor point. Maybe I should come in a bit closer. Going blind. All right. Command G, group this together. And now he's got a little smile. Cute. Okay. I reckon we need some freckles as well. So these are pretty easy. They're just dots. You could draw them with the brush tool, but I think because we're going to After Effects and After Effects doesn't really like differing stroke types, let's do them with a little circle.
شايفين هون بلشنا نرسم الوجه، بلشت المعالم تبعه تطلع، وحتى هلا بنحاول إن احنا نرسم الغمازات أو نرسم الخدود مثل ما احنا شايفين.
And then Option drag as well to put them on the other side. So really easily.
شوفوا هون عملنا كيف بدي أحكي لكم 3 وجوه بشكل أو 3 نقاط. خلت ال3 نقاط هي أو هي صار الشكل، هو صار شكل الخدود بشكل جدا جميل، وصار بشكل جدا بسيط وسهل. فما ضروري نحن كتير يعني كيف بدي أحكي لكم، ما ضروري نحن كتير نكون يعني بروفيشنال بهالشغلة، لأنه شيء بسيط ممكن هو يفرق معنا.
Anyway, we're going to do one of those up here, and just the pen tool will do. And this shape, it kind of doesn't really matter what it is. It just kind of has to look a little bit like it's bloated on his top. So something like that will do. Just a full black.
ونعمل مثل النجمة فوق شو تعطي حركة.
It might be worth it just to slightly round these corners again too, so we're matching that style. So something like that will work. And we'll also give him a leaf because he's fresh off the tree.
تمام.
So again with the pen tool you could do this leaf
عم
any way you
تحكي إنه
like.
في عندك مشكلة
Just a few
بالتلوين، شو
points
المشكلة اللي
to
عندك
it.
بالتلوين عشان
Usually
أعرف
I would
أعرف
draw a
كيف
shape like
نحلها؟
this, get it somewhere close enough, and then go back with
شو
our
المشكلة بالضبط؟
corner changing tool and just adjust these points. You can also switch back to your direct selection
ممكن
and
إنك تبعتي على الجروب شو المشكلة أو
move
تبعتي صورتها أو
individual
شو عم يصير
points and
معك
edges
عشان أعرف حلها.
around. So kind of using those two tools to really refine this until you get the kind of shape that you want, which actually that's it. That's the way that I want it to go. That'll do for now, but maybe come back to it. We'll make it green as well and give it the same stroke as everything else. 2, 1 and 5. Cool. I'll make it a bit bigger. Okay, cool. So the next thing we're going to draw is his arm and his hand, and I'll let you in on a bit of a secret. I am terrible at drawing hands. It's been one of the things that I just have never been able to crack. So a good way to work around this, everybody does it, is to find a good reference.
إيه عم تحكي لي إنه
So
أنت
we
عم
started and I'm
بدك
going to
تحددي لون
select
معين،
cartoon
فلما
hand,
تحددي لون معين بدك تلونيه، يعني بتلون كل
and
الدائرة
start
بكل
on what
بساطة،
we'll
لأنك
probably
أنت
do. So we're going to
بتكوني
zoom out that and
ما
we can bring it into our
حددتيها
project and
بشكل
we could
مناسب. كيف
use
يعني؟
this
الدائرة
canvas
هي
because
أو
it's a vector,
الستريتور
which is
بشكل عام
fantastic. But what
برنامج
we
غير
can
برنامج
use it like
فوتوشوب،
I'm going to
كله
just
كله
drawing
بيكون
reference for
بجروبات
the
أو
hand.
كلياته بيكون
So
صور مع
let's
بعض.
get that
فنحن لازم
and
نحن شو لازم
open
نعمل
our
عشان
notebook.
نحن
We go to
نلون
our hand
الصورة
reference,
أو نلون الدائرة،
I'm just
نضلنا عم
going
نضغط على
to flip this
الدائرة اللي نحن
away and we're going to
بدنا
use
إياها، بعدين
this
نلونها.
hand here
مثل ما
as
نحن
our actual
شايفين بالمثال
reference.
هون
And
عندنا أيادي،
you'll notice
شايفين
the color's
هالأيادي
locked,
كلياتهم
so
بجروب
Command
واحد، فإذا
G
بدي
on the
لونهم
illustrator is locked.
لازم
So
أضل
it's
أضغط على
going on
الإيد اللي أنا
there.
بدي إياها
Get it out
وألونها
of our
باللون
way.
اللي أنا بدي إياه.
Alright, so
أما
we're going
إني
to
أنا
use this
لازم
hand
أضل أضغط على
reference
اللون
and we're
أو
just
أضل
going to
أضغط
tap
على
a little bit because obviously the
على
finger is
الدائرة
moving out,
كذا
so we
مرة
want to
لحتى
be as big
تتحدد
as the
الدائرة
pointer.
تبعي. بس
And
لازم
I
أضغط
think
عليها
my like style is a bit
بالسلكشن
different.
تول اللي
We're
احنا
going from
شايفينه هون.
here, we're
هي
going
السلكشن
to
تول،
that real sort of
هي احنا نضغط
glovey,
عليها،
mouse cartoon
ضلنا
style.
ضاغطين
So we're
لحتى
going to make all the
تتحدد
fingers pretty bulbous. So I'll start a little bit wider than this, but kind of just gives you a good idea of
بهالشكل.
proportion using a reference like this. So we've given it a nice big thumb, and then we're going to go down on a bit of an angle here to give us a finger. Just move this in a little bit more, and you can switch between the pen tool, the anchor point selection tool, and the direct selection tool to really have like good control as you're drawing these things. All right, so pretty happy with that. Our gloved hand. I'll just Command G, group all that together so we've got one nice shape, and actually make sure this other side, we'll use the direct selection to just cut through that group, but that's also filled with white now. So if we drag this over, we've got a nice gloved hand. All right, so we'll make this about as big as that, I reckon. And for the arm's really easy. So we're just going to start it off, I don't know, about there, and just with one big stroke. You could do both sides, but I think it's pretty simple. Turn off the fill, and then we're going to make this like maybe like 40, maybe a bit bigger. Maybe let's try 60. Cool, yeah, that looks pretty good to me. Or maybe even a little bit bigger. It's all in the details. We'll drag this in front, so Command Shift bracket again, and just kind of position this until it looks about right. I reckon about there. And then I usually like to keep a copy of this just in case I decide I want to change the arm shape later, because it's much easier to do it when it's in its stroke form. But I'll just move that out of the way, and then we're going to go to Object, Expand, Fill and Stroke, and then we've got a nice solid shape now that isn't a stroke. And I just want the color to be exactly the same as the rest of his body, so I'm going to just color pick using this eyedropper tool, which will give us both the stroke and the fill, which is really handy in this case particularly. Also just going to
إن شاء الله
hit
نحن
this
في
line here. So if you click your direct selection tool
في
and
الأسبوع
then
القادم راح أعطيكم
select that
مشروع
particular
لوجو
line
بسيط
and hit delete,
نستخدمه
it'll
ونشتغل
delete,
عليه
which is also really
مشان
cool.
نحن
Chunk
نبلش
this into
آه،
our nice rounded
نبلش
corners,
نشتغل بشكل عملي إن شاء
and
الله.
that's all looking
بهذا
really
الشكل
good.
نحن بيكون
Alright,
بلشنا بشكل عملي،
now we're just going to do
والأسبوع
some
اللي
very
أو
quick
الأسبوع اللي بعده
highlights
بنراجع
and shadows, just
نراجع
to, I don't know, give this a bit more
الواجبات أو
depth.
نراجع المشاريع
So
اللي أنتم
I'll
عملتوها
do
مع
these
بعض
with
مشان
the
تصير في عنا خبرة
So
عملية.
starting over here, because he's an orange and you know they're kind of lumpy, and because we're about freshly squeezing, I'm going to give him like a bit of a wavy highlight over here. So just draw something like that. And the great thing about the brush tool is if you're like drawing this line and then you decide, oh, it's actually
تمام
not quite right, I actually want, you know, maybe one less wave.
بإذن
You
الله هلا
just
حاعطيكم إياه.
select the path and then just go over it again, and as long as you're starting and ending on the path that you've already drawn, it'll just fix it up and snap it the way that it was, which is great. So yeah, I reckon something like that. Maybe we'll just have it be a little more up here like I had it. Something like that. We want it to be graphic but also a little bit illustrative, so something like that will do. And I'm just going to move it out a little bit. All right, great. So that's a good shape. Now we're going to fill it again with this orange, but we don't need a stroke on this one. A good color for a highlight, I think, always starts with the base color that you've got, but we'll just pull the black completely out of it. So in your B column here, pull that out. And in saturation, you can pump that up a little bit. So there's still a bit of color, but you know, it's a lighter tint of what we have. And then we're going to also make this overlay, so it's a bit luminescent. All right, and that's probably, we might want to make it sort of, I think I want it positioned slightly around the top a little bit more. So I'm just going to rotate it using the center of the orange as the rotation point. So if you hit R, that will bring up your rotation, and this little anchor here is where it's going to rotate from. So right now it's here, but we want it to be from about center. So I'm just going to just click and that will change that. And then you can click and drag to rotate the shape that you've made. So that's probably good. And then we obviously want to crop this into just the shape of his base. So I'm going to Command C to copy and Command F to paste in front, and then Command Shift open bracket to bring in the front. And we're going to use the Pathfinder tool to do this bit. So this is a really powerful tool.
هون نحن
Sometimes
عاملين
it'll end
رسم
up over
برتقالة
here, but if you
ثانية.
can't see it, go to Window, Pathfinder, and you can also bring it out in this little dialog box. So there's lots of options you can do here to keep, you know, to create shapes and unite shapes and build new shapes. It's really good. So we'll select both our objects, making sure that the circle is in front, and then we're going to hit the intersect shape today, which will give us our highlight shape. And classic, this happens every time and I forget about it, but it will take the fill and stroke from that top object. So we just need to change that again. So just go back and do
تمام.
sort of what we had done before and overlay that. So we get the same treatment back. And then we're going to put the leaf on top. All right, and we're also going to do a shadow for under his arm here. So this is going to be pretty important because this arm is going to move like this. He's going to go thumbs up. So the shadow that we make also has to move with this and kind of look natural as he moves his arm. So what might be the easiest is to move it into a position where you might see most of that shadow. And then we're going to use this as our base shape for that shadow. So just Alt.
هون طبعا نحن
Drag
بلشنا
to
نرسم الإيد
duplicate his
الثانية.
arm. We're going to flick the color and then put this behind that. So Command bracket to move it behind. And then I'm just going to adjust this slightly and pick up this singular point and drag it to meet that one. So it's coming from under his arm. And then we're just going to square this off
تسمعين الصوت صح؟
slightly using
لما
the
شي يكون
handles
الصوت
so that it
باين
kind of comes a bit
ويكون صوت باين.
straighter down from his arm. And then these ones will oops, these ones in the shadow will come up just to show where the shadow ends. So that looks all right. Let's just rotate his arm back so you can change that anchor point. We look
هنا
before.
شوف كيف بنحاول ننزلها من تحت. كيف
And
عرفنا
then
ننزلها
in
تحت
After Effects
ونطالعها
we're going
لفوق؟
to hide
بكل
this
بساطة
with
لأنه
a simple
آه
hat to his body
لأنه
shape.
شو اسمه،
So
لأنه
if
حطينا
you
الأنكر
wanted
بوينت
to finish
بمكان
your illustration, you know, to this
الكوع،
standard,
فلما
you could
حطينا
do that
الأنكر
same
بوينت
process I did
بمكان
before
الكوع
where you
صرنا
crop it
نقدر
out. But
نحرك
I think because
السبجكت
we're going
عنا
into
لفوق
animation for
لتحت
now, we'll leave
بكل
this
وضوح وبكل
and
بساطة.
do that masking in After Effects. Great. Okay, I'm just going to quickly do some highlights on this leaf too. So we'll do another kind of bulby shape up here, and exact same process as before, just making it that green, taking the black out of it and making sure it's on overlay. And then, you know, you can come in and do a bit of refining to make sure that it's not hitting that line, but because it's on overlay, you can't really tell. No one's going to see it up that close. All right. Kind of want it to match the leaf as well. Cool, and we'll just give it a little shadow on this far side of it. So I'm just going to use the brush tool again, and something like that might be a good start.
هنا بنعمل
I'll
الشادو
pick this because we
تبع
want it to just be there. And then we'll be
الوردة اللي
doing
فوق تبع
these shapes
اللون
in
الأخضر.
front. So there you go. It's just subtle, kind of a little bit of extra thickness really on this line. Smoothly go into the line that we've got. There we go. Cool. All right. So there's our character pretty much done. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Cool. All right, so here's our character. I'm pretty happy with that arm, so we can probably just say goodbye to that. Now we're going to do the rest of the sticker around him. So draw another circle, which is bigger than him, and we're going to make it this nice purple color. And just for ease, we'll group all of him together, Command G, and then I'm going to drag him on top just so we have another version, Command Shift bracket to bring him to the front. Cool. All right, and we probably want about that much space. And now we're going to use some fonts. So what we're going to do first is Command C, Command V this circle, and just so we can see it really easily, I will make it a red line, and we're going to center this to this circle until we get about that big. And we're going to use our Type on a Path tool, which is up here. If you hold down, you can select this one, Type on a Path, and then you go over to your path, and when it highlights blue, you can click, and it will put the text around that circle for you. So we're going to have freshly is the first word we're going to do. So we'll select that, or you can just Command A, select all of that. All right, so I'm going to use a font called Sandy Bold, which you can find on Envato, and there'll be a link in the description below as to where you can find this one. But, you know, lots of fonts you could use for this. Just try and find something nice and vintage. It's a good way to go. All right, so there's our font. I'm just going to also give it about 70 on its kerning. Just so, you know, with these bold fonts, it's a little bit easier to read, especially on the circle like this. And I'm also just going to rotate it up until it looks all right. And then we need squeezed as well. So Alt, I'll just drag this out, Alt-Shift to drag and copy, and we'll write squeezed in here. But as you can see, this is not going to work because it'll be upside down, which is very annoying.
هي من تحت لفوق، فلازم احنا نعكس الكلام. لازم نخليه الروتيت تبعه بالعكس. مثل ما شايفين هلا حنعكس الكلام.
These ones are your kind of flow on things. So if you wanted to add
لاحظوا كيف
another
حنعكس الكلام.
circle, you could click those, but actually generally they're kind of unhelpful. So this one is the one we want, and you can just flip that over and then that will bring your text to the inside. And if you bring that over now and select our freshly, and then double select it to have this be our hero anchor, and then you can kind of make sure that they're aligned that way. It's a bit too
السؤال تبعك ما فهمته.
the radius of that, because it's taking it off this one. So usually what I do is just make sure it's all lined up to the center, and then scale it.
السؤال تبعك ما
Alt
فهمته.
and shift until that blue line hits the top of the text that you're wanting to match, and then we will just pick that text again to make sure it's the right size, and then you can just rotate it till it looks center. All right, so we've got our text. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger, maybe like that's good, and then just rotate these into place. And actually, I think, you know, a bit more a dynamic sticker. Let's off center the rotation of these. So that looks pretty cool to me. I'm going to make them white as well.
تمام. أي
Lovely.
نصر معكسين
Okay.
الكلام.
I'm just going to ungroup our little orange because now he's in the right spot, and bring his arm in front of the text. So just selecting it all and
كيف تجمعيهم
bracket
بقطعة واحدة؟
again.
بكل بساطة بتحددي
And
كل
yeah,
الأشكال
that's
الموجودة
okay.
معك،
So we're just going to
بتحطي
very
كليك يمين وبعدين
quickly now
بتحطي
make
جروب.
our
راح
little
أوضح لك كيف
side
شلون هلا.
oranges. And
راح
this is
أعمل
a
شير
really
عندي
easy
على الكمبيوتر الثاني.
illustration to do because it's all just basic shapes. So we're going to start with our orange circle again, and then select
راح
just
أعمل
this
هون
point
أنا،
on here with our direct
ولنفترض
selection
عندي أنا
tool.
حاليا
Delete that.
خليني أحكي لك إنه عندي حاليا دائرة لونها أحمر مثلا، تمام، وعندي دائرة ثانية لونها هذا اللون، ودائرة ثالثة عندي إياها بلون بنفسجي مثلا بهذا الشكل. بدي أجمعهم كلياتهم، بحددهم كلياتهم هيك، بعدين بقول له كليك يمين، بقول له شيء اسمه جروب. هلا شوفوا كيف صار كلهم بيتحركوا بقطعة واحدة، صاروا كلهم قطعة واحدة حاليا بهذا الشكل. صرنا نستخدم قطعة واحدة، نجي نحددهم هيك كلياتهم، بنقول له بعدين مثلا أنا جروب. هلا صار أنا جروب، فينا نحدد واحدة واحدة بهذا الشكل. هيك صار في عندنا جروب وأنا جروب. حدد كليك يمين اللي بعدين جروب. هيك نحن شفنا شلون ممكن نحن نعمل جروب لقطعة كاملة أو لعدة قطع بهذا الشكل. خلينا نرجع للدرس تبعنا.
Because we just want a semicircle, and
هيك
then we're
صار
going to
بقطعة
close
واحدة.
this shape. So if you hover with your pen tool and you get this little divider line, then it knows that you're talking about that anchor point and you want to close it, and the circle means the shape is going to be closed, which is what we just did. And then we're going to round these corners off a little bit just to match our style as well. So that's our basic slice shape. Then we're going to go up to object and go to path. Offset path is what we want, which is going to give us the same path again, just scaled up. So it's a bit, sometimes it's a bit better than scaling because it'll keep the same like ratios on the corners, rather than scaling will kind of distort it. So sometimes this is a better way to cut things into pieces. Cool, so offset 10, that looks all right. Just hit OK. And then this middle shape is going to be our inside wedge bits. So I'm just going to color pick the same color as here so that it matches our highlights. And then to get our little wedges, I'm going to use the pen tool and just draw a straight line up the center of this shape. And I'll just make this something visible. And it's not quite center, so I'll just select both these and double select the back one to center that. And then we're just going to rotate this from this bottom point. So again, press R for rotate, select the bottom anchor with your rotate, so your anchor's down there, and then we're going to hold Alt Shift, and I'm just going to do this by eye as well. And if you're holding, oops, and then if we go back here and holding Alt, till we get, you know, some nice quarters in our wedges like that. And then we're going to select all of these and use again our shape builder tool to separate these shapes out. And then we'll delete these bits, we don't need them. And so now, oh yeah, classic, we've forgotten that it changes our colors, so we'll just change that back. And then we're going to do the same offset path thing again to give these a bit more space. So object, path, offset path, and this time we want to go negative because we want them to go in, so we'll go negative maybe 3, and if you click off it'll show you what it looks like. So that looks pretty good to me. Hit OK, and then we can just delete these back ones, and that's our little wedge. So Command G that, group it all together, and then we can bring it in, and maybe we'll put it on a bit of an angle and copy it over here. All right, how's that looking? Maybe a bit bigger. All right, I'm gonna drag this off the artboard so we can see better here, but we're going to also just give this an outline using that same offset path technique again. I mean, there's plenty of ways you could do this, but I think offset path sometimes is the easiest because then it's a shape, it's not just a stroke as well. So there's our little outside line, which I've just made white.
هون تقريبا نحن بلشنا نخلص بأول
And now we're going to give it
أول مشروع
texture
عنا. مثل
with our
شايفين عنا
last
كذا مشروع
step.
بنحاول
So
نخلص
I've got this
المشروع
texture from
الأول.
Leonardo, which is just a poster stick texture, and I'm just going to drag out, alt drag the base, the very base of our sticker on top of that, and we're just going to make a clipping mask. So if you select both, you can do it up here under Object, Clipping Mask Make, or Command 7, which is another very handy shortcut. And then we're just going to bring it on top, so you might select that back one, double select it again, and center it, and then bring it to the front using Command Shift Bracket, and we're going to multiply that as well. And there's our sticker, all done. Okay, so we're ready to bring this into After Effects, and usually I would use this great plugin called Overlord, which you can go check out. It makes this process a lot simpler, but I'm going to show you how we can do it without any plugins. So the most important thing is that we separate this illustration onto some different layers, and for ease as well, we're going to use this artboard here. So if you want to create a new artboard, you can go to Document Setup, Edit Artboards, and select this one, and we're just going to Alt-Shift to copy this artboard as well. So this one's exactly 1080 by 1080, which is a nice Instagram size, and will be the exact same artboard size that we make in After Effects. So that everything comes over in the right spot, we'll just make sure it's the same artboard. All right, so there's our new sticker, and we're gonna, first off, this multiply effect, we might just remake this in After Effects, I think, but we'll put it onto a different layer anyway, and we'll call it paper texture. Then the text, I think we can outline this because I'm pretty happy with it. We don't need to edit it when we're in After Effects, and there's a whole other way that you might actually have to make this text come over in a circle in After Effects, which I don't want to have to worry about today. So I'm gonna expand this, or you can go, it's actually Object Type, Create Outlines, or Command Shift O, and then these are just raw shapes now, which is fabulous. So I'm gonna pull that onto a different layer and call this Type. And then we'll grab our little orange slices and we'll call these oranges. All right, well, let's call them orange slice. Then we want his arm to be one layer, so that can go onto a new layer and we'll call it arm. And then we can put his freckles and his mouth and his nose we'll do on a new layer, and we'll call this face. and the leaf head. So the leaf we put on a different layer because I reckon it'd be cute to have him, you know, his little rotate of his leaf there. So that needs to be on its own layer. The face I'm not really planning to move, so they're good together, but the arm we definitely want to move, and the eyes I think we're going to have these do a little rotate and him sort of have his eyelids come up. So we want them to be separate from the rest of his body. I'm also going to I'll put his body on a new layer, and on that layer I think we can also have this, which is probably just going to move with his base, so we'll put that there. And the highlight we'll keep on a new layer because we might want him to rotate, but the angle of the light is not going to change if he rotates, so that needs to be on a separate layer too. So let's just bring that back up. So this is orange base and this is highlight. All right, and then we just need to grab his eyes, so let me switch that off. And actually I'm gonna just delete the whole second eye because we're gonna do this with a pre-comp in After Effects, and it'll be much easier just to duplicate the eye after it's animated. So we'll just drag the eye elements onto a new layer, but we actually want to have this broken up into more parts. So I'm going to put the pupil on its own layer. Basically everything that you want to move has to be on its own layer. And then we'll put, this is the eyelid, and this is the eye back, and then on the eye back somewhere is going to be our, it's white as well, which makes it hard to see, but our star. So we've got the star, we've got the pupil, we've got the eyelid, and we've got the eye back. So we'll make a really simple eye rig for that when we get into After Effects using that piece. All right, and the only last thing I want to do probably is flip the arm on top of that type there. And oh, the other last thing, actually no, that's not the last thing, the shadow. So we'll just put that on its own layer as well. Shadow. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is just make sure this is the only artboard in the comp. So I'm just going to go through and delete this artboard and this artboard. And it shouldn't really matter, but I'm just going to delete all this stuff as well, just so it's nice and clean. All right, so we've saved that. We have saved that, and we're going to jump into After Effects now. Okay, so welcome to After Effects, my favorite program. So we're going to create a new composition that matches our artboard in Illustrator. So let's just call this freshly squeezed VO1. Cool, so we're just going to adapt this to be 1080 by 1080 to match that artboard size. 25 frames a second is fine for what we're doing today, and about 5 seconds is good too. So you just select those and hit OK, and we've got our artboard. So to import our file, we can just go File, Import, File, or you can just drop and drag it in. Navigate to where you saved your file. Here he is. These you don't really have to play with. There'll be another dialog box just now when I click Open that I usually change the settings in. So import kind as composition is good because we want all of our layers. If we imported it as footage, it would import it as one flat object, which is not very helpful. And that's all grayed out, so that's fine. Footage dimensions, layer size, that's fine because our document and layer size are the same because we've made it all 1080. So that's okay. All right, so here is our, it's actually made us a brand new comp, which is fine. Because it's brought in the comp and it's exactly the right sizes that we need, we actually don't need this other comp that we made before, but you know how to make one if you do. So let's just delete this comp and we'll just work in this one that we've got already. Okay, so our paper texture, as you can see, it's masked, which is great, but it hasn't got the multiply effect that we need anymore. So That's quite easy to replicate in After Effects. If you come down to mode, you've got all your color blending modes that you would normally have in any other program, which is great. So we'll just put that back onto multiply. So the first thing we're going to do is parent some things together. So we have to animate less, which is great. So our arm, the other thing we probably want to do as we parent is make sure that our anchor points are in the right spot, because right now if you can press, if we drop down this menu and bring up our tools, we're rotating from the middle of his arm, which is not where arms rotate from. So we're just going to use this, it's called the pan behind tool or the anchor point tool. And we're just going to drag this point up to where we want it to rotate from. And it will scale and move and everything from this position now. It's not just rotate. So that's in the right spot there. And then we're going to parent the arm to the orange base, which is his body. So if we move this around, that's his body there. The next thing we're going to do is parent the type to the back of this sticker, because we're going to add a bit of rotation movement to the orange and to the text and these orange slices as well, just to give it a bit of dynamic easing. So the type actually and the orange slices can all connect to the sticker background, so that now if we hit R on our keyboard to bring up rotation, that's going to all move together nicely. The next thing we've got here is the face, so that can just connect to the orange base, which is his body. The leaf, the same, but we're going to, with the leaf, we want this to rotate too, and so we're going to use that same pan behind tool just to adjust it to where the leaf would probably rotate from, which is about there. Our highlight also has lost its blending mode, so we're just going to make this overlay like it was in Illustrator, and that's done that, which is good. And we will parent this one as well to the orange base, like so. All right, then what we're going to do with the eye is a little bit different. We're going to pre-compose the eye and do our animation in a separate composition. So you can think of comps kind of like artboards. It's a good way of separating them out and keeping your layer stack neat so you can focus exactly on what it is you're trying to animate. So if we select all of the parts of his eye, so the star, the eyelid, the pupil and the eye back, and right click to pre-compose, we're gonna get this little dialog box, which we're gonna name it eye. You would just leave it as these settings. I think in this case it's pretty simple, this one. So now our eye is all together in this one layer, and if we double click into it we get just the eye by itself, which is exactly what we want. So for this piece of animation we're going to have his eye, this little star, rotate, and we're going to have him look up and have his eyelid sort of move up as well for a nice little bit of character animation. So the star is really easy. If you press R on your keyboard to bring up rotation, we're just going to give this a tiny expression, which is a very handy one. So if you press Alt and hit the rotation stopwatch, you'll bring up the expression panel. And all it is time, asterisk, maybe like 100. And if we play that, it's just going to keep going at 100 times. I'm not quite sure what the math is here, but it works. And the bigger the number, the faster it will turn. The smaller number, the slower it will turn. So maybe 200 is probably good here. So there you go. And then we don't have to worry about setting any keyframes at all. It's just going to do it. And now we want to have his eyelid come up so that he's kind of squinting as the animation starts. So we're going to do this with position, so P on the keyboard to bring up position, and we're going to set a keyframe. So if you just click the stopwatch without pressing anything else, you'll set a keyframe here, which you can zoom in on down here and see exactly what frames we're working with. So yeah, I reckon maybe about 15 frames in, we can set another keyframe, and that's our final resting spot. And then if we go back to the start and then drag this down, or you can just, pull it around wherever you want here, that's probably about you know, where we want it, off his eye. So that's probably all right, but maybe it's a little bit slow and a little bit flat. So make it a bit faster, and then we're also going to add some easing to these keyframes. So easing basically changes the velocity of the speed in which, you know, an animation moves. So we are going to just right click and go keyframe assistant easy ease, which will turn both of these into easy ease keyframes. And if we look at this in the graph, which is here, you can see what it looks like. You've got a nice curve now at the start and the end, so it's slow to start and then slow to end, unlike what we had before, which was a straight line, as you can see there. So let's just do that again, easy ease. You can also do it down here in the graph editor. So we've got a slow start and a slow end, which maybe could still be a bit faster. So what I might do, so that we can adjust this graph a little easier, is separate the dimensions. So you can right click, separate dimensions here. X position is this way, which we're not animating right now, so we don't need that one. I'm just going to click it off. But Y, now we've got handles here, which we can use to adjust the easing of this particular movement. And because we don't really need to have the slow start here, we just kind of want the slow in, I'm going to make this a really steep curve so that it's kind of fast at the beginning and then slows in. So something like that, maybe a little bit faster again, because a blink is pretty fast. But of course, what good is an eyelid if it's on the outside of your eye? So we need to mat this to the back of this eye layer. And Illustrator layers are sometimes a bit hard to work with, so we're going to make shape layers out of this eye as well. So if you right click and then go to create shapes from vector layer, it will give us the exact same shape, just editable in After Effects now, which is really handy for lots of other reasons as well, other than just this particular scenario. And we're also going to do it with the eye back as well. There we go. And then we can just delete these layers. We don't need them anymore. All right. So then you're going to go to your effects panel, which is over here. Or if you can't find it, it'll be in Window, Effects and Presets to bring that up. And type in Set Matte, which is the effect we're going to then drag on to the eyelid. And then basically what this does is tell us from another layer in our composition when you want to see
وصحيح إنه إحنا لسه ما دخلنا على الأفتر إفكت، بس هي بدائية جدا مهمة نحن نعرف الأساسيات، لأنه دائما الأفتر إفكت مرتبط مع الإليستريتور بشكل جدا جدا كبير، كتير مرتبطين مع بعضهم، فنحن بس عم ناخد الفكرة الأولى تبعها.
Which is really good. But as you can see, it's like not really bringing the stroke with it. So we're just going to duplicate the eye back outlines and drag that to the top of our stack, and then just remove its fill. So if you go up here and you press the blue fill, you get all the different fill options, so gradient, colors and that kind of thing. But we don't want any, so we're just going to hit no and hit OK. And now we've got a nice matte with our eye working pretty nicely. I think for realism, when you squint, your eye, your pupil is going to move too. So we'll just do a simple, the same position animation on the pupil too, where that'll be our end state at the start. We're just going to have it, be a bit lower like that. And then the easing, we'll just make that the same as the other one. So separate the dimensions here off the X and the Y. There's another great plugin that I often use called Ease Copy, which lets you copy the exact same ease values. There we go. And lastly, we're going to parent the star to the pupil as well, so that the position of the star will follow the pupil too. Okay, how's that for an eye? Go back into our animation. Tee-hee. Cool. All right, so let's duplicate that eye. So we've got two, as all oranges do. And the face is in front, so that's good because we don't want his little, maybe a bit more overlap with the nose looks good. And maybe we'll bring this slightly closer together. Cute. All right, how's that? Looking pretty good? Cool. All right, now let's add some rotation for the sort of animation of this sticker. So we're just going to get the sticker ground, which is this background layer, and parented to that, remember, is our type and our little orange slices. And we're going to make this like maybe negative 30, I reckon, but doesn't really matter. Animation is all about what you feel. And then about 10 frames in, we're going to make this 0, so it's back to normal. And then ease-wise, if we go to the graph editor, add some ease to this. I think same as our eyes, we want a fast in and a slow stop. Yeah, so it's kind of like whipping in is the movement we want. And then we're going to get the orange base, which is our orange guy, and we're going to rotate him as well. Maybe, oh, we've forgotten to parent some things. The eyes, because we just did them. Parent them as well to your orange base. Yeah, that looks all right. I will explain this messy shadow in a second. All right, so maybe a little bit less, so negative 20 is good because we want this to move slightly less than the outside, and we'll give it the same easing as well. Something similar. Cool. I reckon actually this back one can be more. Maybe let's do negative 50 so there's more discrepancy. And you can also extend the length by a couple of frames of the orange so he lands slightly later. Pew! Maybe a little bit less. Maybe I went too crazy. Yeah, that's nice. Cool. All right, now this arm shadow, let's deal with that. I think we will parent it to the arm because when he moves his arm, we want the shadow to kind of move with him as well. But obviously we want it to be stuck behind this circle. So we will, I think here let's use a track map just for something else. So we're going to duplicate this orange base by pressing Command D. So you've got the exact same back that we want him to be masked by. Okay, with this new update of After Effects, we can now have a track mat anywhere we like. So you can use it the very similar way to parenting, where you select this pick whip and, oh, it's the other way around, isn't it? We want the shadow to be track matted by our base, which has just happened there.
راح نحاول بس إنه نحن نختصر
with these little toggles, which is very handy.
شو بسموها هالنقطة مشان نحن نكون فهمانين أكتر وأكتر ببرنامج أفتر إفكت لما نروح نفوت عليه فهمانين نحن شو عم نعمل. فحاليا نحن حنفوت على برنامج الستريتور مرة تانية، بعدين نحن نفوت على الدرس الثاني نحن مشان نبلش بالدرس الثاني اللي عنا اليوم. خليكم معي. أنا حكيت لكم برنامج الأفتر إفكت مرتبط ارتباط كامل مع برنامج الستريتور لأنه هما الاثنين بيكملوا بعض. فلما هما الاثنين يكملوا بعض راح يكون في عندك خاصية إنك تعمل شيء اسمه مو جرافيك ديزاين، شيء اسمه موشن جرافيك. الموشن جرافيك هذا شيء كتير كتير مطلوب بالعمل. طبعا نحن ما راح ناخده هلا، لا، ولكن نحن راح ناخده في الدرس تبع الافتر افكت بكل بساطة. أنا حاليا بعد ما شفنا كيف ممكن نحن نرسم باللوجو ونعمل الألوان ونجمع القطع مع بعضها، حاليا راح نروح على الدرس اللي بعده مشان نكون جاهزين للدرس الثالث. خليكم معي. طبعا هذا الشكل اللي عنا هو الشكل نفس البرق، لكن بطريقة مختلفة تماما. هاي نحن بنعرفه. خليكم معي. تمام. تمام.
فيها.
هون الستروك عنا إياه بحالتين، حالة الأسود والعفني.
أعرف أبدأ بإيش، وهذا بحد ذاته تصير مشكلة يوم. يعني جالس ساعة ساعتين أضيع وقت على السوشيال ميديا، وأبدأ أحل وأشتغل على توافه الأمور
هون
وليس
احنا عم
أهم
نعمل
الأمور.
كذا
فأنا عشان
ايكون.
كذا كتبت كل
بروح
المشاكل
على شكل دايرة.
والأهداف والأفكار والأشياء المفروض أسويها على ورقة. بعد ما خلصت هذه بديت أقول إيش الأشياء المهم يصير اليوم، حطيت عليهم علامة. بعدين بعد ما حددتهم بديت ذاته تصير مشكلة يوم. يعني جالس ساعة ساعتين أضيع وقت على السوشيال ميديا، وأبدأ أحل وأشتغل على توافه ناخذ واحدة ثانية. يوم. يعني جالس ساعة ساعتين أضيع وقت على السوشيال ميديا، وأبدأ أحل يوم. يعني جالس ساعة ما أعرف أبدأ بإيش، وهذا يوم. يعني جالس
and you'll probably have some favorites like me as well. You
وهذا
can
بحد
really
ذاته تصير
learn to
مشكلة
use
يوم.
those to
يعني
take
جالس ساعة
advantage of
ساعتين
them
أضيع.
and kind of get the desired effect that you're looking for. Cool, so that is transparency. So next we're going to move on to the Pathfinder tools and the Shape Builder tool. Now this is really cool. So the Pathfinder tools, let's create some shapes. And we'll go back to our good old red and yellow squares. Ha, classic. And if you haven't got the Pathfinder panel on the right here, just go to Window, down to Pathfinder, And this is brilliant and incredibly useful when designing logos. So let's just create 4 copies of this. So I'm just dragging, holding Alt and Shift, and I can repeat that last action by pressing Command or Control D. Twice. There we go. Fantastic. In fact, I will just do one more. Now, there's a lot of different Pathfinder options here. These all do behave slightly differently, and it's worth experimenting with them. The ones we're going to be focusing on are the shape modes here, and then this one here, the first one, divide. In my experience, using these 5 key tools within the Pathfinder options, create all the effects you would ever need to create a merge, combine, and cut out shapes. So we're going to show you that right now. So the first one, if I drag over both the red and the yellow square, go to the Pathfinder panel and select the top left one. This is Unite. And we can click that, and it combines these 2 shapes into one shape. So if I go back and go into outline mode, remember that's Command or Control Y, you can see this is how it looks. I can select them both and unite them together or add them together, and it will combine those into one shape. And whereas before they had a question mark as the fill, because there isn't just one fill, there's multiple fills, so it can't tell you which color it is specifically. Once those are combined, it will then take the color of the shape on top and we'll add that into the fill down here. Now, the next one along is called minus front, or you can think of this as subtract. And what it will do is it will take the shape that is on top and it will subtract it from the shape that is below. So the shape on top is the yellow one, so when we click that, you can see it knocks it out from the red one below, and of course that has kind of changed the path of the shape as well. And next, if we select these 2 here, we're going to go to the next option along. This is intersect. And if we click this, you can see the point at where the shapes intersect is retained and everything else is discarded. And for the last one, this is exclude. And of course, you guessed it does the exact opposite of intersect. We click that and it discards the middle where the shapes cross over, and it retains everything else on the outside. Now the last one down here is divide, and the reason that I wanted to show this one specifically from the Pathfinder options is because it is incredibly useful. So I'm just going to use the pen tool to create a rather terrible shape, and we'll just give this some more color. So this is a design. Please don't take it seriously, but this is supposed to be a design. We're just merging lots of shapes together. And if I go into outline mode, you can see that these shapes overlap each other at lots of different points. And if I drag over everything and in the Pathfinder panel select divide, well, you can see nothing happens. However, it does. What it does is where these shapes all overlap, all of these paths that we're looking at here, it separates those into separate shapes. And what that allows us to do is we can use the direct selection tool to pull apart all of these individual pieces. Pretty cool, right? Or what we can do is just go to Object. If I just kind of go through that process again. So use the divide option and then go ungroup. And then I can use the main selection tool to do the same thing. So essentially, whichever tool you use, it combines these, it breaks these all apart into separate shapes. And we can pull those out. Now, the Shape Builder tool. The Shape Builder tool is slightly different. The shortcut for outline mode is Command or Control Y. Incredibly useful. So the Shape Builder tool is something that you'll be able to use if you have a more recent version of Illustrator, and it's incredible. It's a huge, huge time saver. and we'll be using that later on in the course. So if I select all of these shapes and then select the shape builder tool, you can see that I can mouse over all of these different elements. So where lines intersect, it creates a break, and I can essentially select each individual segment. Now, the way this is brilliant is you can left click and you'll see it starts drawing a line. It's not actually drawing a line, by the way, but I can drag into other segments, and the dotted area is marking what's going to be combined together. So if I drag through these different segments here and let go, you can see it combines all of this into one shape. And let's go back into outline mode. This is a really good way of using outline mode, because you can take out all the color and focus on actually connecting all the dots, combining all the shapes in the right way. And it's a lot easier to do it this way because there's less distraction as well. But if I wanted to remove this segment here that I've got highlighted, you can see by default there is a plus next to the arrow icon. What I can do is hold down the Alt key, and that changes to a minus, and I can left click and it will knock out that part of the shape. So even though all of these were individual shapes to begin with, when you select everything and then use the shape builder tool, you can work with them and add bits in and remove bits, all as if it were one complete shape. So let's create something even more complicated, just because this tool is fantastic. And we'll add lots of color in here. Please don't judge me. This isn't the extent of my creative work, honest. There we go. We'll duplicate that holding Alt and dragging. Right. Lots and lots of circles. Looks very fun. Okay, cool. So just remember to drag over everything with the main selection tool, select the shape builder, and now we can draw a path all the way through all of the different segments. And it will combine those like so. And we could then just knock out some of these shapes. Now, another really good use of this is if you wanted to create a cloud, for example. So you can see here, I'm literally using just all the basic shapes, circles and the rectangle tool to create this shape. But of course it looks like that in outline mode. And while that's fine, we want to kind of tidy that up. It's best practice to kind of, keep your shapes, merged.
تدري إن يمديك هذا الوقت خصوصا نحب التقنية والبرامج الصوتية والكتب الصوتية يمديك تخلص فيها عشرات الكتب أو على الأقل كتاب واحد في الأسبوع تقريبا عندك مشاوير كويسة. فوقت الرياضة فنمثل
cloud. So that's just a really quick example. Okay.
أول حاجة وقت
I love
المشاوير.
those tools. They are fantastic, but let's move on. So the next one is swatches, or global swatches to be more specific.
فمن هذا المبدأ
Now,
ثلاث
a
أوقات
swatch
just insane.
is a
أول حاجة
colour.
وقت
It's just another name
المشاوير.
for a color within Illustrator, and you have the swatches panel over here on the right. And by
أول حاجة وقت
default, it
المشاوير
loads in all of
والمهام
these
البسيطة.
different swatches. And we can double click one.
رايح
And at the moment we're working in RGB. You can change
أول
that
حاجة
to
وقت المشاوير
CMYK or other
والمهام
values here,
البسيطة.
grayscale, depending on what you're looking
مشوار.
for.
تدري إنه يمديك بسيطة.
And you tick the preview box and adjust the color.
وأنت
And
رايح
it will adjust
مشوار. تدري إنه
in real
يمديك
time.
هذا الوقت خصوصا الحين بالتقنية.
Lots and lots of colors to choose from, or you can pick something from the color picker or enter that 6-digit hex value here if you know it, and then click OK. So with this as the current color in your toolbar, just click that new swatch icon and you can see that it adds it to the end. So you've got your new swatch. So we can go through and just double click, change lots of values, and we've created a color palette. By the way, if you do double click any shapes by mistake, you can see up here that you've kind of gone a layer into that shape. Especially if you've got more complex shapes, you can go deeper and deeper. If you do that and you end up in this mode, which is called isolation mode, it's intended for working on specific shapes in a bit more detail. You can just go back here or click the arrow to exit isolation mode altogether.
insane. أول حاجة
So that sometimes happens. So if you double click, don't worry, you can escape from isolation mode. It's not as terrible as it sounds. Okay, so we've made an averagely terrible color palette. No, let's add a yellow. We'll add a yellowy orange. There we go. Fantastic. So we've got a color palette there. Now, if I'm working on illustration or a logo or just something incredibly complex, which I'm going to try and very, very quickly mock up now. So imagine these are lots of different ideas, and I've decided that I want to use a certain color within my design, or I've created an incredibly complicated illustration and it's all been done in with this color palette. And I think, I really need to change the color. I don't want to go through and select every line manually. I want to do it in the most time efficient way possible. Well, what I should have done before doing all of this is created a global swatch. Because if I want to change the yellowy orange color here, I've got to go through and manually change it on every single one, which is incredibly time consuming, boring, and ultimately there's a better way of doing it. So for me personally, when I'm creating a swatch, I always create them as global swatches. I can never really think of a good reason not to, just because it gives me that extra bit of flexibility further down the line. So just select your swatch, double click, and just tick this global box. That's it, that's all you've got to do. And you'll see this little white tag kind of appears in the corner there. So we'll just make each of these 3 swatches global swatches. And we can drag these around as well. We can reorder them. And you get a few more options up here related to swatches if you need them. And of course you can delete swatches just by selecting them and hitting the delete swatch. That's the trash can symbol down the bottom right, and it removes that swatch. But these are all global swatches. So again, let's go crazy and create lots of shapes. We can use the eyedropper tool to sample that same color, and of course it will use that same swatch. So I'm just going to create some crazy shape madness as quickly as I can to try and illustrate this. We've got something a little bit Mickey Mouse going on over here. I don't know what that is. Okay, so imagine this is a fantastic illustration. What I want to do is I want to change the purple without having to go through and manually change each shape. Well, because this is a global swatch, it affects the document. And I can just double click that global swatch, select preview, and as I adjust this, it affects every instance of that color in real time. So imagine this is a complex illustration or an app design or a logo design with lots of different parts, lots of detail. You can go in and you can just change it in an instant. And then I can change the yellow, make it more orange, and then I can double click the red, tick preview, and I can make this green. And that takes seconds, whereas doing it the manual way is a lot more time consuming. Cool, so that's a little bit about swatches. Next we're going to look at gradients. And we'll just start by selecting our good old rectangle tool. We've got a very vibrant green there. Now gradients in Illustrator are also really awesome. We've got the gradient panel on the right, and you can find that down here. Now first of all, you can just select the gradient slider, click anywhere on it, and it will create your default black to white gradient. And you can reverse that gradient if you like. So we'll go left to right or right to left, or you can manually adjust the angle of the gradient. And you've got lots of presets here. So you can go from top to bottom, left to right, whichever you'd like. And of course you can quickly reverse that. And you can of course swap the fill and the stroke. So that gradient, if I zoom in, you can't really see it here. If I just increase that stroke weight, the gradient is now applied to the stroke and then back to the fill. So you can quickly swap the fill and the stroke using those double-ended arrows down there. So we've got a gradient, and you can change the type from linear to radial, and it will emanate from the center towards the edges. And of course you can reverse that as well. So lots and lots of fun options. You can adjust the start point for each color as well. So if I want more black, I can drag this over to the right. And if I bring the white in from the right hand side, you can see it creates a very, very harsh divide. So for a softer gradient, it's always better to move these color swatches apart. Now for any gradient, you've got to have a minimum of 2 because you have to have one color that graduates into another. However, you can see by hovering along the line, I've got the plus icon and I can add more swatches. And I can then double click a swatch and pick a color. And I'll double click another swatch, pick another color. And that's another great thing about using global swatches is as I create this gradient with global swatches, again, if I go back into the swatches panel and change that global swatch, because that green is quite awful, you can see it will update it in every instance, and that includes gradients. And there we go. So we can click this again and we're back to the gradient panel. Now remember, we need a minimum of 2, so I can get rid of this black because it just doesn't really work with the vibrancy of all the other colors. So we can just click that and drag it off. And I can extend this out. And the orange one, I can now adjust the location. So you can see that down here, that percentage moves as I move it around. Let's set that to 50% just because I'm a perfectionist and it has to be right in the middle. And of course you can adjust the opacity of any swatch by selecting it and changing the opacity there. Or you can type a value in if you like. And of course, between each individual swatch, you can adjust the position, and that's this little diamond icon here. So very similar to moving the swatch itself, you can introduce a bit more of one color and a bit less of another just by adjusting the breakpoint here within the gradient. So those are the little diamonds, and of course they have their own percentages as well. So if I click 50, or if I type 50 rather and press enter, this little diamond goes in between the orange and the green swatch. Cool. So that is gradients. We're going to look at a couple of other additional tools, and then we're going to jump in to actually creating this logo. So another really useful tool that I absolutely love is the smooth tool. And you can find this down here. So depending on your version of Illustrator, it will either be under the pencil tool or the shaper tool. And you can just left click and hold and select smooth tool. By the way, shaper tool is also really useful. You can left click and drag with the shaper tool, and it will recognize what you're drawing and attempt to draw it. So if you're doing anything like wireframing, or you're just kind of conceptualizing ideas, you can use the shaper tool to very quickly draw straight lines, draw shapes. Even if you draw like an absolutely terrible one, you can see there I did a circle within a few seconds. So that's incredibly useful if you're looking to do something very quickly. Right, so the smooth tool. So let's just draw a line. Now this is very common with the pen tool, especially if you're new to the pen tool. Your lines won't look as perfect as you might like. In fact, I get this even now, you know. So this isn't a a new to Illustrator thing. I use this tool all the time now when I'm creating lines. If I create part of a logo in Illustrator and it's just not as smooth as I'd like, I can nicely smooth it out. So you can see here, we have that little kink there. It doesn't flow as smoothly as the rest of the line. However, we can left click and hold, select the smooth tool, drag over everything, and then select the smooth tool again.
Structure.
And all I need to do is just left click and drag over the part of the line that I want to smooth out. Now this line is all connected, which is what we need, and I can just left click and drag. You can see it's kind of showing me where I'm drawing, and I just need to go over that one segment. And you can see it smooths it out, it adjusts it, and it's added another anchor point in there. Not quite smooth though, so let's go again and again. And I'm just left clicking and dragging, until it's perfectly smooth. In fact, with this tool, you can, it's often a case of trial and error. You can go out, you can do this as many times as you like. You can see as I'm smoothing this, it's changing the shape every time. And sometimes you can go too smooth, but then you've also got the undo option. So just remember Command or Control Z, and you might go smooth, smooth, undo, undo, and you can use that to very quickly get the type of curve that you like. But it's fantastic at just removing those little kinks, those little awkward curves that aren't as smooth as you'd like them. Right, we've also got the knife tool. Now this is quite literally what it says. I can select the shape. It's under the eraser tool here. We've got the knife tool. And you can use this in a very kind of freehand fashion. And you can make those slices, and what it does is it will literally slice apart your vector shapes into different segments. So that's pretty straightforward. Something else we'll just talk about briefly is the scissor tool. So if I create a circle, remember that's selecting the ellipse tool, left clicking and holding shift, and we'll just increase that weight, and then just left click and hold where the knife tool is, select scissor tool. What I can do is I can select a point along the path and select another point over here. And then with the direct selection tool, I can now select in between those points and just hit delete. And it removes that space in between. And I could then just left click and hold shift. And we've created something like a power symbol. So another really useful tool if you're kind of looking to create gaps between lines, or you're doing icons or doing a lot of line work. So incredibly useful tool. It's the scissor tool. Right. So those are the essential tools to create logo designs within Illustrator. Let's just kind of have a look and see if we've got a few questions, and then we will jump into creating this. This is definitely going to be more than 60 minutes. Xandercorp says, is there an automated way to say separate the line from the fill as two different paths instead of it being one thing? I don't think there's a way to automatically separate it, but what you can, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You could create a shape, and what we'll do is we'll give this a stroke, give it a slightly darker color, and I'll just thicken that up. So if you really wanted to separate the stroke from the shape, something I would do is just go edit, copy, edit, paste in place with the shape selected. Hold shift and use the right arrow key and just nudge it out. And then just on one shape, deselect the stroke. On the other shape, just deselect the fill. And then hold shift and use the left arrow key and nudge that back in place. Now, of course, it's on top, but I can go to Object, Arrange, and Send Backwards, and it will send it back behind it. Now, the good thing about this is these shapes are still too editable, or at least the top one is still editable in terms of width. So if I were to go Object and Expand, what it does is it turns that into just another shape. So this isn't a stroke that is now editable, it's just another shape. So at least kind of doing it that way will keep them as two editable shapes. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, Studio JPK says, how does he make that zoom square? What is the shortcut for it? I think he's asking. Okay, so how to zoom in Illustrator. Yes, so when you become familiar with the zoom tool and the shortcut, which is Z on the keyboard, you can navigate around the document incredibly quickly. So if I just zoom back out, in fact, by the way, zooming back out, these are ones worth learning. So fit, artboard in window, and actual size are incredibly useful. So that's Command or Control 0 or Command or Control 1. So I can zoom in and then zoom out just by using those shortcut keys. And of course, if I'm zoomed out and I want to zoom in, which when doing logo work, you know, precision is a really important thing to me. I like to zoom in thousands and thousands of %, as you'll see in a moment, just so I can get absolute precision. So if I wanted to zoom in to this square, I could just press Z on the keyboard, left click and drag around the area, and it will focus in on that area that I selected. I mean, you can just use the zoom tool and just left click, left click, left click, left click, and go in that way. But I find it a lot quicker just to drag around the area that I want to focus on the artboard, and boom, it zooms in and fits that to my window. And then of course, I can go back and use those shortcut keys here. In fact, these are worth learning as well, zoom in and zoom out. And then I can use these shortcut keys to very quickly move around my document.
Dit is gewoon. Dit is geen instelling.
Zanderkorp says, does that merging tool exist in CS6 as well? I think it might be worth double checking. The shape builder tool, I think that was something that was introduced in Illustrator CC.
Alles vast ligt,
doesn't
maar omdat
necessarily
er
need to be
rust
the
is.
latest version, but I think Illustrator
In de
CC
keuken
is when the shape builder tool
maar omdat
was
er rust
introduced.
is. In de
However,
keuken
everything that you can do within the shape builder tool, you can do with the Pathfinder tools. It just is a little bit of a longer process sometimes. So before, with the shape builder tool, we could draw through all of these and merge them. You can do that with the Unite option in the Pathfinder panel, or if we wanted to, you know, hold Alt and knock that middle bit out with the shape builder tool, again, you can do that
kamer
with the
met
exclude
privacy
option. So
en
there's lots of different
verwachtingen die
ways that
passen bij
you
jou.
can,
Alles wat je nodig
you can use the different tools. In fact, when we come to do the logo in a moment, what I'll do is I'll try and use a combination of the shape builder tool and the Pathfinder tools as well. So if you have a more recent version of Illustrator, the shape builder tool is a fantastic addition. But if you are on CS6 or older, you can still create loads of awesome shapes and you're not limited really in any way. It's just a little bit more convenient, that's all.
En dit uitzicht, dat is geen decor. Dat is de wereld.
Right. So those are the tools.
Waar je weer onderdeel van bent.
I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, so apologies, but hello, what's the easiest way to make shapes striped? Well, there's lots of different ways that you can do this in Illustrator, and I think what I'm going to do now is probably one way. So we can create a series of stripes.
Jouw pad, onze begeleiding. Pad, onze begeleiding.
And we can use the alignment options to just space those out equally here. And if I open the swatches panel and just drag that into the swatch panel, it will add that as a color swatch. And then we can go and apply that fill to a shape. And as I make that shape bigger, it will just adjust the size. In fact, that was a pretty terrible attempt at stripes. Let's do this a bit better. Okay, we'll zoom in. We'll make these really long. And what we'll do, remember it's Command or Control D to repeat your last action in Illustrator. So really useful if you'd like to do something like this. And then we can drag all of these into the swatch panel and it will make an image swatch. And then we can go and add that as a fill. And it behaves a little bit differently there. Let's go and try another one. So let's copy this and rotate. So you can get really, really creative, but anything that you create within Illustrator, you can add as a swatch and then use it within other shapes. So we could add that to this. It's only, okay, so it's only really using that part. So what we can do now is we've got all of these as lines. We want to use this middle section. We don't want these bits around the edge because they're causing problems. So if we go to Object and Expand, it then converts those from editable strokes into shapes. And from the Pathfinder panel, we can unite all of that together. And then what we can do is we can go and trim off some of this excess with the direct selection tool. So I'm just dragging over all of these end anchor points and then hitting delete or backspace. You can see there, so it's a very complicated shape and it doesn't want to play nicely. Now this is something that happens a lot in Illustrator when you work with more and more complex shapes. So let's try this another way. We'll just draw a square over that center area and then just drag over both of those shapes. So we have our crazy kind of throwing star in the background, and then we have our shape on top. We can go to Object, Clipping Mask, and Make, and it will clip that shape to the shape on top. So the shape underneath will be clipped and cropped to that shape on top. Let's try adding this as a swatch. No, it doesn't want to play ball. It doesn't want to play ball. Okay, instead of angles, let's try something a little bit different. We'll do something a little cleaner. There we go. And we'll just duplicate that and rotate. There we go. It's a lot more simpler. If we drag this in, you can see, there we go, it fills that entire kind of swatch space. So the more complicated your shapes, when you kind of import them as a swatch, you may get different results, you know, not exactly as you'd intend. But typically, from experience, the best swatches work when they look like this, when they fill the whole swatch panel. If you do have this excess white, which I created just then, that excess white is going to be part of your fill. And of course, that was why the kind of shapes weren't working when we just created those varying shapes. However, if we select this one and apply this as a fill, you can see it adds it there. And we could even go and just trim off these edges. You see they're repeating those edges around the shape. We don't really want that. So we've trimmed off the edges. We'll add that as another swatch. Even weirder. Lots of fun swatches. That's probably one way to do it. We just demonstrated to make a shape.
10 plus. 10 plus man.